Hayden for those comments, and you've told the audience what I'm going to talk about, but I'll just repeat it. I want you to imagine that I'm a time traveller. I've come back here from a future where we have a steady state economy. Now, I'm not going to tell you how we got there or how long it took, because basically that's going to be up to you. But one thing you will realise from my presentation is that we don't have PowerPoint. Well, I'm also going to, because I've been asked to do this, talk about capitalism and how it doesn't fit into our steady-state economy. And I think when I finish that you'll be able to conclude that every major facet of our life is different to yours. The biggest difference, though, is that ours has got a good chance of survival. Certainly not yours. That's because we have a way of life which is in close harmony with the physical environment. And I'm going to let you know that our system extends across the whole globe, because I think that's important. You'll have to. You should be working for that, of course. You'll have to go across the whole globe. Above all, of course, we live within the Earth's means. We've retrofitted ourselves into the environment in a manner that utilises natural processes, providing food, water and energy in a non-disruptive way. Second, and this is important, we also live in harmony with each other in a fully cooperative way. And that's essential because there's none of the competition, greed and dominance in the society that you are so well accustomed to, and which is the major cause of environmental depletion and social disharmony. In the brief time that I've got, I'm going to describe the main features of our steady-state way of life in terms of our values, our water, energy and transport systems, and our social organisation, including our settlement patterns and governance arrangements. Well, first of all, values. We have a completely different ethic to yours. Our main aim is to live sustainably and cooperatively. We seek and enjoy a good life rather than material accumulation and the gaining of privilege. We see ourselves as belonging to the earth rather than the earth belonging to us. Similarly, our attitude of non-superiority applies to our view of other human beings. In our society, and I want to stress this point, all people are regarded as equal and treated equally throughout their lives. And this has brought about obvious benefits in terms of health, education, satisfying work, and involvement in governance. Also, the community, not individuals, own and regulate the land and its resources. Private ownership of land and resources has been fully replaced by cooperative ownership and by organisation at the local level. Moving on now to supply of food, energy, water, and also housing. The underlying principles concerning our access to food, energy, water, housing and other materials are those of sustainability, obvious, and self-sufficiency. Every community is responsible to the maximum extent possible for supplying themselves with the basic necessities of food, energy and water, and for providing health and education services from the places where they live. This means, of course, that being in direct contact with their environment, people have a very close understanding of their character and potential and how to use them sustainably. And also, as a result of that, have a great respect for them. You will see in that echoes of what happened or what was in the Aboriginal communities of tens of thousands of years ago in Australia. So in other words, the kinship between people and their environment has been re-established. The people who have the most to lose from resource depletion are now in charge. Water is drawn from within the catchments where people live. Fruit and vegetables are major crops, and as a result of reliance on local production and permaculture type practices, such as the use of legumes for nitrogen production and waste from humans and animals, there is no industrial scale agriculture and no use of industrial fertilizers and pesticides. Energy supply is also from local renewables sources, and being decentralized, we do not have the vast energy grids of your day. Goods are designed to have a long life and be capable of being recycled. There's been a major recycling of materials left over from the huge abandoned cities of the past. Needless to say, we did not arrive fully at our steady-state destination until we had repaired the serious environmental damage of the past and adjusted our populations and consumption to a sustainable level. Trade. With communities being largely self-reliant, there is little need for trade in commodities. Where it does occur, it's largely between adjacent regions of the same country and on an exchange basis. Exploitation of resources and labour by means of international trade and competition are a thing of the past. Now, moving on to our populations, settlement patterns and quality of life. These are largely determined by the character and carrying capacity of the different localities in which people live. Hence, most settlements are small in scale. The alienation of people from the environment that was created by living in large cities is a thing of the past. People work where they live. We have a settlement hub in each region for purposes of technology development, manufacturing, governance, health, education and the arts. In these larger but not large towns, we have cooperatively run community gardens. In our non-hierarchical, classless society, as I mentioned, all people are treated equally. There are no superiority distinctions made with regard to the nature of the work people do, and there's a considerable amount of job sharing. Cooperation in performing tasks and in creative activities is normal, but there are no private companies for this purpose. Overall, people live more simply than they did in the economic growth-driven society of the past. With all basic needs met, people and cooperation have replaced competition as a major goal, and people have richer and more creative lives. In addition, because we no longer have an economy based on the goals of endless economic and population growth, and because we do not have economic and social inequality, the world's overall population consumption of resources is massively reduced compared with what it once was. Roughly a quarter of 2000 AD levels. It took a long time for this adjustment to be made, as you might well imagine. What about travel and transport? With most communities and regions being self-reliant in terms of the supply of basic necessities, there are no major long-distance supply chains for the transport of commodities. People work in their local area, and public transport, along with cycling and walking, are the main forms of transport. And the connections between localities and regional hubs are largely by these means. You'll be surprised to know, perhaps, that we do have air and sea travel, and this is by means of publicly owned planes and ships. There's a considerable amount of human travel, both within and between countries, for a number of purposes, including recreation, education, health, governance, visiting libraries, and creativity. People travel to learn and take pleasure from the differences between places, the wonders of the natural world, and the way in which different communities relate sustainably and creatively to their own environments. I'm sure some people in the audience will be interested in this, but internships in different regions and countries are common and usually on an exchange basis. Turning now to governance and security. Our governance is based on the fundamental principle of self-government and principles of self-government and participatory democracy. Every person has a voice, a say in the planning and management matters that concern him or her. At the local community level, people assemble and vote on measures and issues and choose delegates for regional assemblies. The same approach of voting and choosing delegates is used for representation at the national and international assemblies. Any national issue is put to a vote of the whole national population after discussion in the various assemblies. Otherwise, the scope of the assemblies at the various geographic levels has been determined so that they only deal with relevant matters. For instance, at the international level, the matters discussed relate to global scale environmental changes and threats and include the management of the global commons, such as the high seas and Antarctica. The universal acceptance of the sustainable use of resources on a self-sufficiency basis eliminated the resource struggles between communities and nations, including the use of the military to secure access to resources and territories that was diverting major resources into the manufacture and sale of armaments and causing, as you would be very well aware, major social disruption. The economy, to go back again to this, private ownership of land and resources has been replaced by community ownership, and the communities, through their individual and collective efforts, are responsible for the supply of all goods and services. People do not aspire to accumulate wealth and live in better conditions than their fellow human beings. In our steady-state economy, all people are guaranteed the same standard of living. As a result, when we made these changes, there was no need to continue the past practices of allowing private individuals or groups to either make investments for profit, creating additional costs, of course, or taking out loans and creating debts. Money and the market in our world are purely for their original purpose of facilitating transactions, and we have no private banks making money out of the interest of loans. Which brings me now to the question I've been asked to answer, the situation of capitalism in the steady-state economy. We don't have it. Why was it found to be incompatible? In fact, nothing illustrates so well the difference between our and your systems. Capitalism, as you know well, was an integral facilitator of the economic growth of the system. It depended on economic growth, competition, and the making of profit for its very existence. In the capitalist market, and this is an important point, people exercise enormous power, and it helped to create and maintain social inequality. Since it depended for its very existence on never-ending economic growth, it could not survive in a steady-state economy. Capitalism was a beneficiary also of the globalization of trade, involving the foreign ownership and development of resources, such as fossil fuels, in distant places, destroying the nexus between people and their lands. The capitalist owners of land and resources themselves had little or no feeling of responsibility for the long-term future of the lands and the inhabitants of the places they were exploiting. Their overriding objective was maximization of profit for their benefit. Capitalism placed the money value on things of intrinsic value, resulting, for instance, in the deforestation of water catchments and the destruction of the habitat of indigenous wildlife to supply distant markets. Capitalism was, in fact, economic colonialism, and seriously obstructed efforts to move to the sustainable use of land and resources and to self-sufficiency by interfering with local and national controlled resources. Short-term profits were viewed as more important than the future. We decided that it was far better for the control of the land and its resources to be exercised by the people who live there and who have a better knowledge of it, and more important of all, most important of all, a greater stake in its future. Also, just as the economic and social class system was closely interlinked with capitalism, it was realised that full equality was an essential necessity for our steady-state economy. Finally, capitalism did not make a good bedfellow with our system of participatory democracy. Hence, for all these reasons, capitalism had to go. To conclude, if we had not made this change to a steady-state economy, the prospect for the survival of humanity would have been bleak. We have readapted our way of life to the biophysical limits of the Earth and its dynamic equilibrium. And in doing so, produced an altogether more sustainable and more satisfying way of life. Finally, when our historians looked back at how the state-state economy evolved in your time and later, they found several works that were prescient in terms of describing what our steady-state economy would look like. The pioneer, of course, was John Stuart Mill, who in his 1848 book, Principles of Political Economy, described an alternative stationary state of population and capital. And more recently, Samuel Alexander, in his 2013 book, Entropia, Life Beyond Industrial Civilization, has written an imaginary but far-sighted account of a flourishing, simple way of life on a small Pacific island. Then, of course, there is Herman David, a winner of the 2014 Blue Planet Prize, who was described in the nomination as the preeminent exponent of the steady-state economy, the main alternative to the prevailing economic growth paradigm. Thank you.